Welcome to Bible Study Hub. It is the week before Christmas here in 2022. So I really appreciate everybody who's taken time out of what is undoubtedly a very busy time of year to be with us on Bible Study Hub. We're actually not really doing Christmassy stuff on Bible Study Hub only because I know that most of you are getting your fill of lots of good stuff with all the sermons and the programs and the cantatas and the plays and all of that stuff elsewhere. So I figured we just kind of stay the course with what we've been doing, which is the book of Genesis, but certainly want to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Well, let's get right into it because we are going to pick up in chapter 43 tonight. We ended with verse 15 last week. We're going to pick up kind of with 15 and then grease the skids to go on to verse 16 and thereafter. So we've been in the story of Joseph. It's a harrowing story of a young man who is so ill-treated for no good reason. He's innocent. He's a fantastic guy. He loves the Lord. He serves the Lord. He serves his father. He is faithful in everything he does. And it feels like at every possible juncture, he just gets slammed for it. Feels very unfair. He ends up being promoted through a series of events that we covered in previous weeks to number 2 in the country of Egypt, number 2 to Pharaoh. And so what he is now in charge of is all the food distribution during a famine. And again, if you just joined us for the first time tonight, I would encourage you to go back and listen to previous weeks because it really kind of sets this up. Well, in an attempt to see if his brothers have changed, when they end up coming to Egypt to get grain, they do not recognize him. They don't know who he is. He sets into motion a series of events that is nothing short of brilliant to test them to see if they've changed or if they are the same vicious brothers that ended up selling him some 20 years prior to the land of Egypt. At this point in time, Simeon has been held captive as a prisoner. Well, the brothers went home to get baby brother Benjamin, who was not along for the first journey. And of course, Jacob did not want him to go. Jacob really still does not want him to go, but they're running out of food. So they have to go back to Egypt with baby brother. And I say baby brother. He's in his 30s probably at this point. So he's not so baby. But Jacob absolutely does not want anything to happen to him. So here we go. Let's pick it up here in chapter 43, verse 15. And as we kind of get rolling, this will all kind of, I think, come back to us. It says, so the men took this present and they took double the money with them because remember, Joseph had put their money that they bought the grain with back in their sacks. They didn't know how it got there. So they took double the money and gifts of like myrrh and balms and nuts and honey, all that type of thing. They took all that with them. And Benjamin, they arose and went down to Egypt and stood before Joseph. So let's see what happens next. Chapter 43, 16 to 18. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, bring the men into the house and slaughter an animal and make ready, for the men are to dine with me at noon. The man did as Joseph told him and brought the men to Joseph's house. And the men were afraid because they were brought to Joseph's house and they said, it is because of the money which was replaced in our sacks the first time that we are brought in so that he may assault us and fall upon us to make us servants and seize our donkeys. Oh man. So Joseph is preparing this feast for his brothers and they just absolutely freak out. And you can kind of understand why. This is not normal. None of this is normal situation stuff. So they're just simply trying to make sense, as we all do. When something doesn't make sense to us, we start sometimes crafting stories in our own mind without even realizing it of why this must be happening. So in their minds, the only explanation they can come up with why this number 2 to Pharaoh is like the vice president of the country, wants to have you at his house under the presumption of dinner. They can't figure this out. Verses 19 to 23. So they went up to the steward of Joseph's house and spoke with him at the door of the house. So they're like, we need to self-advocate here because something bad is about to happen to us. Verse 20, and said, oh my Lord, we came down the first time to buy food And when we came to the lodging place, we opened our sacks, and there was each man's money in the mouth of his sack, our money in full weight. So we brought it again with us, and we have brought other money down with us to buy food. We do not know who put the money in our sacks. So they're just like, this is the story of what happened. We don't know how it happened. We're giving it back. We brought extra money to buy food. We're trying to do the right thing. And then the steward says to them, he replied, "Peace to you. Do not be afraid. Your God and the God of your father has put treasure in your sacks for you. I received your money." Then he brought Simeon out to them. This is just a stunning response. Your God and the God of your, in case it's not clear, we're not talking about our gods in Egypt. Your God, the God of your father, he put the money in your sack. Well, who do you think told the steward to tell them that? 100%. That was Joseph's influence. I don't know if he had said, if this happens, say this, or whether he had just been under the influence of Joseph for such a while now that he had kind of gotten into like understanding life in those terms. But for whatever reason, that's what he says. It's a glorifying moment, I think, to God and to God's work in Joseph's life and around him. And Simeon is brought out to them. Poor Simeon. We talked about him last week and what he must have been thinking all this time. He's in prison, and everybody went home, and Jacob's like, "Nope, you're not going back." Just let Simeon stay there, I guess. Poor Simeon. You kind of have to feel bad for him. Verses 24 to 25. And when the man had brought the men into Joseph's house and given them water, and they had washed their feet, and when he had given their donkey fodder, they prepared the present for Joseph's coming at noon, for they had heard that they should eat bread there. I just wonder if it felt a little bit weird. Here you're in this opulent palace with the number 2 guy in the entire country of Egypt, and you brought him like balms and nuts and stuff. You know what I mean? Like that, like it's like a Harry and David's gift to the president of the United States. It's just, you just kind of, I don't know if they felt like, oh, this is kind of pathetic, honestly, but you know, it's what we have. So that's, or maybe it was, maybe they gave him like gargantuan amounts of it. I don't know, just something that crossed my mind. Verse 26. When Joseph came home, they brought into the house to him the present that they had with him and bowed down to him to the ground. And there it is. Remember last week we said his dream that God had given him almost completely came true, but not quite, because in the dream of the stalks of like wheat, and then his stalk rose up and 11 other stalks bowed down, but only 10 brothers came last time. Now all 11 are there, and they all bow with their faces to the ground, and that dream is 100% fulfilled. Oh, amazing. God is amazing. And he inquired about their welfare and said, "Is your father well, the old man of whom you spoke? Is he still alive?" He keeps asking about their father. They have to be like, "What? Why do you care?" And they said, "Your servant, our father, is well. He is still alive." And they bowed their heads and prostrated themselves. Well, moving on to verses 29 to 31. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin. Now, stop there for just a moment, because it's going to tell us here in just a second. But remember that Joseph's mother was Rachel. That was the wife that Jacob originally wanted and thought he had worked 7 years to get. And then he ends up being tricked by Uncle Laban. He gets Leah, and then he has to, in order to acquire Rachel, promise to work another 7 years. Big story there. Again, you can go back and listen if you missed it. But one of the problems that the brothers had with Joseph was that he was the son of the favorite wife. That's all there is to it. And it made them mad. So this is his brother, the only other child of both his father and his own blood mother. And of course, she died in childbirth, having Benjamin. So this is an amazing moment where he again sees his baby brother, the only one that he's a full brother with here. So it says, I'll just start over. And he lifted up his eyes and saw his brother Benjamin, his mother's son, and said, "Is this your youngest brother, of whom you spoke to me? God be gracious to you, my son." Then Joseph hurried out, for his compassion grew warm for his brother, and he sought a place to weep. And he entered his chamber and wept there. Then he washed his face and came out, and controlling himself, said, "Serve the food." Well, you're probably wondering about, like, what does that mean that his compassion grew warm for his brother? What is that? Hebrew is a very concrete language, very literal language. So they tend to describe things in terms of how it looks, how it feels, how it sounds, those types of things, far more than we do in English. So you can tell by the context probably what this means, right? That feeling deep down inside that you literally physically feel it when you have this type of an emotional response to something. That's what it's trying to describe. And that's obviously what happened here. So I have a question for you as a group. You can start typing. Who do you personally relate to the most at this particular juncture? It, and you can just get like a one sentence as to why. You don't have to go into a lot of detail. But do you relate most to Jacob? I mean, you think about Jacob, he doesn't know what's going on. He knows that now all of his boys, every last one, he's had 12. They're all gone right now. He's hoping all 11 that are left will come home, but he doesn't know. Benjamin has been taken. You just imagine he must be home just worrying his brains out and just praying and praying for their safety. Do you relate to him? Do you relate to Simeon, who thought he'd been left? Didn't know for sure if they'd ever come back for him, probably felt rather abandoned. And now, thank goodness, they did come back and he's released. Do you relate to Judah? Remember, Judah's the one who said to his father, "I will be personally responsible for this child, this man, your youngest. You can hold me 100% accountable. He's mine for the journey." Do you relate to Benjamin, who's got to be saying, "What is the deal with me? Like, why does he keep focusing on me? Is it good? Is it bad? I don't know." Or do you relate to Joseph, who it feels like, for decades now, he has been so ill treated. And now all of a sudden, God is starting to put all the puzzle pieces together. Who do you relate to the most? Let's see here. Nobody is commenting. Just wondering if anybody has feelings on that. I had a lot of moments where I got really choked up studying this week because I think there is that emotional connection that we have with different characters in different ways. Alan says, "Joseph, I have a hard time holding grudges and enjoy doing good for others." Oh, wow. That is really, really wonderful, Alan. And knowing Alan, I can vouch for the fact that he's right. That is the kind of person that he is. I, on the other hand, have no problem holding grudges and have a terrible time with forgiveness. Again, I'm just going to be out there. So Joseph, not the one I relate to the most. I don't think. Trying to think for myself. I think in some ways I kind of relate to Jacob because I'm such a worrier, and especially about my children. Just, is everything okay? I hope nothing happens. Blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I have a feeling that he's home being an Anne right now, worrying his brains out. Anybody else want to comment? Maybe that was too personal of a question. You certainly don't have to ever expose anything that you don't want to. I was just curious as to whether or not anybody had kind of a response like, "Oh, I really relate to this guy." All right, well, I will go on. Let's see. Let me get to, oh, wait, we have another comment that just came in. Yeah. Somebody says, "A Jacob biting his nails." Yeah, for sure. You know he is. And it must be very hard indeed because there's no way to communicate while they're gone. So unlike us where, cell phone, text, even back in the day, there was payphones. There's just no way to know what's going on. Well, let's move on to verses 32 to 34. They served him by himself and them by themselves. So they separate Joseph and the brothers because it's detestable for the Egyptians to eat with the Hebrews, which is what we're about to read. And the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because the Egyptians could not eat with the Hebrews, for that is an abomination to the Egyptians. We'll find out why in just a second. And they sat before him, the firstborn according to his birthright, and the youngest according to his youth. So he sat them in birth order exactly down the line, oldest to youngest. And the men looked at one another in amazement. When they were seated, they couldn't believe it. Portions were taken to them from Joseph's table, but Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as any of theirs. And they drank and were merry with him. Okay, we're told in a couple more chapters that the Egyptians considered shepherds to be an absolute abominable group. They did not want anything to do with them. They didn't want them near them. They didn't want to touch them. Well, these boys were shepherds, as the Hebrews tended to be. And so they couldn't really associate closely with them for that reason. But I have a question for you, group, and I know I just asked you one, but I have another one. Hopefully this one will be easier or better or something. Why do you think Joseph gave Benjamin 5 times the amount of food? That is in there for a very specific reason. And the Bible really doesn't overtly tell us why, but if we kind of pull out, I think we can figure out what the strategy was here, because this entire story at this point is now Joseph's strategy on how he's handling the situation to accomplish something extremely specific and very, very important. So why do you think Joseph gave Benjamin 5 times the amount of food? Remember that they're coming here because it's a famine. So presumably they've been low on food. Presumably they're pretty hungry at this point. And Benjamin gets 5 times the amount. Let's find out. Dottie says to find out if his brothers are still jealous. Okay. Emily says to test the older brothers. Would this trigger their malice toward Benjamin? Love it. Lori says maybe a hint as to who he is. Okay. Interesting point. Alan said, would the brothers be jealous of Benjamin? He wanted to see how they treated him. There's great consensus on that. Carolyn says because he was his brother, maybe he subtly wanted to begin to share who he is. Okay, so a couple of you are saying maybe it's because he loved Benjamin the most and he just wanted to bless him more. And then others of you are saying maybe, but maybe also this was setting it up. You remember, let's see, Roberta says, since he was the youngest, he probably only had a small amount of food at home. Yeah, maybe so, Roberta. If you think back to their problem with Joseph, way back when, the problem was intensified by the fact that he had preferential treatment, right? Remember, his father chose him to be the firstborn status because of what Reuben had done with his handmaiden, like his concubine. Again, another story. You can go back and listen to it if you don't know that one. But Reuben disqualified himself. And so Jacob chose Joseph to be the firstborn. And then he gave him the coat of many colors. And that was the uniform of the one in charge. And he put him in charge and he had him overseeing the brothers. And all that preferential treatment made the brothers despise Joseph to the point that they literally wanted him dead. So you can kind of see very possibly what Joseph is doing is just setting up the situation to see what happens if baby brother, my whole brother, full brother, I should say, gets preferential treatment. Is that going to trigger these other brothers into wanting to get rid of him? I think it's extremely savvy of Joseph to really put that much thought into this. Well, let's move on to chapter 44, verses 1 and 2. Then he commanded the steward of the house, fill the men's sack with food as much as they can carry, and put each man's money in the mouth of his sack, and put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the sack of the youngest with his money for the grain. And he did all that Joseph told him. Well, with almost anybody else, by this point, they would get tired of the game and they would just give up who they were and the story would be over, but not Joseph because he's not done yet. He has one more stunt to pull. And I think it's interesting that nobody thinks to check their sack to go, let's make sure the money's not in our sack again. For some reason, that never crossed their minds. This would happen twice, and they just head off with their grain and they think it's over and they think they're going home. And Judah has to be feeling great, right? Because he's got Benjamin with him, just like he said, he's going to bring him back safely. And they're almost through the journey. I mean, they've got one big leg of the journey left, but the really scary part is over. They made it through. He's like, yes, we're going home. But he doesn't bargain for what is about to happen, which happens in verses 3-5. As soon as the morning was light, the men were sent away with their donkeys. They had gone only a short distance from the city. Now Joseph said to his steward, up, follow after the men, and when you overtake them, say to them, why have you repaid evil for good? Is it not from this that my Lord drinks, and by this that he practices divination? You have done evil in doing this. So Joseph basically tells the steward, you go after these guys and you accuse them of stealing my silver cup that I use for practicing divination, which would be, we could say, probably witchcraft would be another synonym that you could put into that. So the question always comes up. Oh no, I mean, we like Joseph so much. Was Joseph actually doing divination from this? Was he dabbling in this? And I looked up what this all involved, by the way. It's a lot of intricacy. I'll just kind of give you like the high level. But apparently they had special cups in these, pagan societies that they would sometimes put water in, and sometimes they would pour some liquid wax into the cool water, and then it would harden in a certain way, and then they'd read the wax, and that would tell them the future. Or they would drop like certain beautiful stones in it, and then the way the light kind of glistened off the stones, that was supposed to tell them stuff. So they had all these different ways of using these cups to try to foretell the future or interpret things or whatever. So that's what Joseph is saying. And a lot of people will say, see, he's enculturated himself too much now into the Egyptian culture, and he's kind of gone off the rails. But the problem with that is that's not the Joseph that we know. That is not even remotely close to who we have seen time and time again. As he's been in Egypt, he has been faithful to the Lord. He has never veered. Like there's not one thing about him that we can point to and go, oh, that's a shame. He really messed up there. There's just nothing. He is blameless. He is a man of integrity, a man of character. He loves and he serves God, and he continues to do that here. So here's what I am going to postulate to you about this whole divination thing. Joseph somehow has to have a reason why he wants the servant to search their sacks for this cup, which obviously has been planted there, without the brothers knowing that that's what he's up to. Do you ever watch like Dateline and 2020 and some of those programs where they kind of take you through this murder mystery? I don't know. I kind of like those, unless they're gory, then I don't like them. But I just find it fascinating. You think it's this person. No, it's this. But if you watch those shows, you'll often notice that the police will have a suspect and they will present to the suspect something that they have to be very careful that they're divulging that they know. Because if the suspect knows, the police know, then he's going to just clam up and not talk. But if they can come up with another reason why this information, or make up information like, well, we have an eyewitness to this, we know you did it because somebody has come forward. And then the person will be like, oh no, and then they think they're caught. So that's the type of situation we have going here. All that's happening is that Joseph has to convince them that he knows they have the cup, but that he doesn't know because he planted it. So he's got to come up with a better reason so that they will believe it. And it works. So he just says and they're familiar with the Egyptians. They know what they do. He goes, oh, you got my cup that I practice divination, meaning the cup or something around the cup told me that you have it. And they would have totally believed that because they contacted evil spirits and things who actually would give them information that was sometimes accurate. So not to belabor that point, but no worries. He was not practicing divination, 100% sure on that. He was just trying to come up with a way of making all this happen without them knowing he was the one who put it in there. Does that make sense? I think I could have said that more succinctly. I apologize for the ramble. All right, well, let's go on to verses 6 to 13. When he overtook them, this is the steward, he spoke to them these words. They said to him, "Why does my Lord speak such words as these? Far be it from your servants to do such a thing." They're like, "We can't even imagine. Why would you accuse us of that? Behold, the money that we found in the mouths of our sacks, we brought back to you from the land of Canaan. How then could we still steal silver or gold from your Lord's house? Whichever of your servants is found with it shall die." Okay, well, they're very sure. Probably not their best moment. "And we also will be my Lord's servants." He said, so they just basically said, "You can execute whoever has it, and the rest of us will be your slaves forever." That's how sure we are we did not take it. He said, "Let it be as you say. He who is found with it shall be my servant. The rest of you shall be innocent." Oh, so he says, no. You don't get to set the terms. Here are the terms. If I find it, that person becomes my slave. The rest of you go home. They had to be like, "Okay, well, that's actually better for us, I guess. But we know we didn't take it." Then each man quickly lowered his sack to the ground, and each man opened his sack. And he searched, beginning with the eldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. Watch the reaction of these boys. Then they tore their clothes, and every man loaded his donkey, and they returned to the city. Okay, so they had the opportunity here to be like, "Bummer. Bummer for you, Benjamin. See ya. We'll let dad know what happened." And they don't. They actually tear their clothes, which is a sign of just intense mourning. Like, this is the type of thing they would do if somebody died that they loved dearly. They would tear their clothes to show how grief-stricken they were. So this is serious for them, this amount of grief. They're devastated. Let me go on to my next folder real quick. Okay, verses 14 to 17. When Judah and his brothers came to Joseph's house, he was still there. They fell before him to the ground. Joseph said to them, "What deed is this that you have done? Do you not know that a man like me can indeed practice divination?" So again, he wants to make sure they don't know how this all came about. So he is reinforcing the idea that the spirits told him that this cup was in their bag. And since they didn't put it there, they're going to believe it. And Judah said, "Okay, Judah, come on, pass the test." He says, "What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants." I just want to stop there really quick. God has found out the guilt of your servants. He says to his brother, "We are guilty before God, and this is our punishment." He doesn't tell his brother, he doesn't know it's his brother. He doesn't tell Joseph what that is, but he says basically, what is happening to us is a punishment from God, and we totally deserve it. This is a huge moment. I mean, think of Joseph hearing this. He's got to be like, "Oh, thank you. For 20 some years, I've been waiting for this." He goes on, "Both we and also in whose hand the cup has been found." But he said, "Far be it from me that I should do so." Like, I don't want you all as my slaves. "Only the man in whose hand the cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father." Okay. What Joseph is doing here is he's making the wrong choice, the historical choice to do the wrong thing, easy. And he is making the right thing to do very, very difficult. So that if they pass the test, it is not by accident. It is not because they were having a good day. It is not because they just happened to fall into it well. They only are going to pass this test if they truly, truly have been changed, if their hearts have been convicted and they have been drawn to repentance before God. He makes it very hard to do the right thing. And you know what? I really think that God often presents us with similar things. I really had never thought about that till I was thinking this through this week. I thought, how often does God give us, like, there's two choices? There's the easy choice, which is not good. And then there's the really, really hard choice, which is good. And God is not afraid to put those two things before us, is he? He is not afraid to give us the hard choice that's the right one, to see what we'll do. Interesting. Verses 18 to 23. Then Judah went up to him and said, "Oh, my Lord, please let your servant speak a word in my Lord's ears, and let not your anger burn against your servant, for you are like Pharaoh himself." Okay, so here's the moment of truth, folks. Do they pass the test? Verse 19. My Lord asked his servant, saying, "Have you a father or a brother?" And so he said to my Lord, "We have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, and he alone is left of his mother's children, and his father loves him." Okay, so here we have it. Jacob also, it looks like from this statement, may have given preferential treatment to little baby brother Benjamin. Is it going to be a problem for the brothers? Verse 21. Then you said to your servants, "Bring him down to me, that I may set my eyes on him." We said to my Lord, "The boy cannot leave his father, for if he should leave his father would die." Then you said to your servants, "Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you shall not see my face again." Well, remember that all of this is being communicated through an interpreter, because Joseph has not let on that he speaks and understands Hebrew yet. So you can imagine Joseph gets all the nuances of everything that's been said by Judah. And then the interpreter, of course, interprets it into Egyptian for him. Interesting. The last time that Judah and Joseph would have had a one-on-one sort of interaction, Joseph, we are told a couple chapters ago, was pleading for his life. He was crying and pleading for his life. Now, Judah is crying and pleading for his brother's life. And it's been completely flipped 180 degrees. Isn't that something? Doesn't that give you goosebumps? What a change has been wrought in his heart. Just what Joseph wants to see. He goes on, verse 24, "When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him the words of my Lord. And when our father said, 'Go again, buy us a little food,' we said, 'We cannot go down. If our youngest brother goes with us, then we will go down, for we cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us.' Then your servant, my father, said to us, 'You know that my wife bore me two sons. One left me.'" And we get new information here, folks. "And I said," this is Jacob speaking, "Surely he has been torn to pieces, and I have never seen him since." Joseph never knew this part. We knew. That's not new information to us. The new information is that Joseph, I'm sure, always wondered what his father was told, what he thought. He had no idea. Why didn't his father come looking for him? Did he believe he was dead? What happened? So all of a sudden, Joseph gets more information about how they spun the story when he didn't come back. Very interesting. That had to really hurt. Verse 29, if you take, his father still speaking here, "If you take this one also from me and harm happens to him, you will bring down my gray hairs in evil to Sheol," which is just simply the abode of the dead, just saying, I will go to my grave, just completely, completely broken and shattered. So now he knows a little bit more information, and that his father did not want Benjamin to come because if anything happened to him, he would absolutely die. Judah goes on, verses 30 to 34. "Now, therefore, as soon as I came to your servant, my father, as soon as I come to your servant, my father, and the boy is not with us, then as his life is bound up in the boy's life, as soon as he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will bring down the gray hairs of your servant, our father, with sorrow to Sheol. For your servant became a pledge. He's talking about himself now. I've become a pledge, he says, for safety to the boy to my father, saying, if I do not bring him back to you, then I shall bear the blame before my father all my life. And then here's the moment that we've been waiting for. Now, therefore, Judah says, please let your servant, me, remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my father. And just like that, Judah passes the test. It's done. It's over. Over 20 years, Joseph has been waiting for a moment like this, and it just happened. Let's go on to chapter 45. We're almost done. And you can understand why this is. Then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, make everyone go out from me. So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. And Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. So Joseph sends everybody out, and then he begins wailing. He is crying from the depths of his soul, and he can't hold it in anymore. I mean, imagine this moment for the brothers. Just imagine. Your mind would be absolutely blowing to smithereens, wouldn't it? Here's this man, he's wailing. It probably scared them absolutely to death at first when he starts crying so loud that the whole household can hear it. And then without any explanation or introduction, he just says, I'm your brother. I'm Joseph. I'm Joseph. How's dad? Is dad still alive? Is he still alive? And they are all like, they can't even answer him. You imagine their hearts just melted with, what are they thinking now? Oh no, this cannot be. How is this possible? Oh my goodness, is he going to kill us? Oh my goodness, what's going to happen? I mean, so many thoughts would be just coursing through your brain so fast. Hard to even imagine what all was going through their minds. Verses 4-8. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near. He said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. But what he says next is just it's unbelievable. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. Wow. What a response. I mean, I'm getting teared up right now. It's just incredible. What a response. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. He's like, we're not even halfway done yet. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on the earth and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh and Lord of all his house and ruler over all the land of Egypt. I have a question for you, and this is where I want to end because it's really, really relevant for us. Let's ask the group. That's my note to myself. Really important to understand. Got it. Here's the question I wanted to ask you. If what the brothers did was evil, and it was, talking about selling him into slavery and wanting to kill him, how could Joseph have credited God with this story? This is huge for us to really wrap our minds around, isn't it? If what they did was sinful and horrible and wicked and evil to the core, how is it then that Joseph can say, I forgive you and don't be angry with yourselves because God is the one who put me here? How is that? I can't wait. I can't wait to hear. Alan says Romans 8:28, for we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and who were called according to his perfect purpose. So Alan is saying, because God took it and he worked it for good. Yeah, for sure. Anybody else? And the reason I want us to talk about this and I want us to end on this is because it's so important for us to understand this concept for our own lives. If you don't understand this, life doesn't make a whole lot of sense sometimes. Emily says he believes in the providence of God. Oh, I love that word, providence. Joseph will save the people from hunger. Only he could have done that to the extent he did. Beautifully said. Dottie says Joseph could see the bigger picture. Okay. So in the weeds, down in the details, are the brothers doing their dastardly deeds. But Dottie's saying if you pull back and you look at the whole situation, you can see that it happened for a reason. This is great. This is, by the way, really, really hard question. Like this is seminary level stuff here that we're talking about. So I appreciate all of you weighing in. You're doing a great job. Carolyn says things happen for a reason. Joseph had that understanding for sure. I want to go back to the word that Emily used for a second, that word providence, because I think that's key to understanding. Oh, Emily says, so what do you think changed the brothers? I think a long time of carrying that guilt and just the slow work of the Holy Spirit in their lives. Honestly, maturity, life experience, trying to sleep every night and having bad dreams and thinking about it all day, every day, and watching their father die 1,000 deaths over the past 20 years because he's so sad. I think all of that kind of combined. Somebody else says, man can work for evil, but God can still use it to bring good consequences or ramifications. Roberta says, Joseph knew God did not abandon him, and whatever happened in his life, God would get the glory. Oh man, good work. Back to this idea of providence. God is so beyond our comprehension. He's so much bigger than any of us. His scope is just astronomical. It's infinite, where we are so finite. And so, what we often observe in life is that there are things that happen that you can look at and you can say, God did not do that. We can look at the brothers, right? We can say, God did not prompt them to want to murder their brother Joseph. He did not prompt them or push them to sell him into Egypt. That was all on them and probably somewhat fueled by Satan too, because of the promise thing that we've talked about, that he doesn't want God's promises to come true. And Jacob's dreams were promises from God. So all of that on its own. But as one of you pointed out, there's this overarching sovereignty, this providence that means that no matter what happens and what choices we make, it is never going to thwart God's plan or his will. That somehow, some way, he can take something that was meant for evil and he can bring good out of it. It's one of the things that I love the most about him. He is a redeeming God. It is his nature to redeem. And of course, when we say that, we mean primarily and on the biggest level, that is our sinful souls that he redeemed for himself by purchasing our salvation on the cross. That is a redeeming God right there. But that's not the only aspect of him that is redeeming. As a general rule, he is a redeeming God, and he will take situations like those that seem like they are hopeless and evil and terrible, and that nothing could come out of them that was good, and he will redeem it. And there are some of you who would give testimony if we had like open mic night and everybody felt comfortable sharing, that you could stand up and say to the group, here's something that happened in my life at one point, and it was horrible, or it was evil. Or maybe it was just something that just happened. It wasn't even somebody did something evil. It was just something happened because we live in a fallen world. And what God did with that and what he brought out of that and where he moved me and how he changed me through that and led me through that was unbelievable. He totally redeemed that situation. And so as we kind of take a little break here for the Christmas holiday and New Year's, and I'm actually, side note, going to come back at the end of January, beginning of February. I'm going to take the whole month off because my daughter's getting married and I want the whole month to enjoy the wedding festivities and family and all of that. So I can't remember what the first Monday is after I'm back, but end of January, beginning of February. Anyway, as we go into that, I want to leave you during the break with this idea. I want you to start looking actively for how God redeems situations that would otherwise be hopeless, helpless, evil, awful, and stupid. And that he will take those situations and he will somehow, some way bring astronomical good out of them. And if you're looking for those things in your life, you know what it does? It makes it a little bit easier when you do have to go through those tough times. If you're looking for a redeemer, say, God, you take the wheel here because I know you're going to bring good out of this one way or another. And I am on the lookout and I'm just your servant. So whatever you want me to do here, I just don't let me mess this one up. Keep me on the right path. Shore me up, give me what I need. But I'm looking for you to bring good out of the situation. And I feel like I can say 100% for sure, I promise you he will. I don't know when, and I don't know how, and I don't know what, but he is a redeeming God, and that is what he does. Well, you all have a wonderful and Merry Christmas, a very Happy New Year to you. We'll still be active on our Facebook page, by the way, even though I'm not going to be teaching for a few weeks here. I love you all, and I thank you again for being part of our Bible study tonight. And be watching because I'll tell you when our next study is, but expect like end of January, beginning of February. All right, love you all. Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.